I stood in the middle of gate C14, watching my sister's car pull away from the drop-off lane, and I didn't understand what was happening until the taillights disappeared around the corner. She had driven off with my phone, my wallet, my ID, not by accident. The last thing I heard before the automatic doors slid shut behind me was my brother-in-law laughing so hard he had to brace himself against the dashboard. My sister was laughing too, that high, breathless laugh she gets when she thinks something is genuinely hilarious. I heard her say, through the gap in the window she'd cracked just enough for me to hear, "Okay, let's see how she handles this one." And then they were gone. I stood there on the curb outside Louisville International with a carry-on bag I couldn't check, a boarding pass on my phone that I no longer had, and about 40 minutes until my flight started boarding. The September air was still warm, but I felt cold everywhere. The thing is, I should have seen it coming. I really should have. My sister has always been like this with me. Not mean. Exactly, that's not the right word, because she'd be the first to tell you she loves me more than anything. It's more like she treats me as a prop in her life. Someone to poke at, to test, to show off to her husband as if I'm a little experiment she runs for entertainment. "Watch how she reacts," she'd say. Even when I was right there in the room. She and my brother-in-law had this whole routine of baiting me into situations and then laughing at how I handled them. They called it keeping me sharp. Our mother called it just their sense of humor. I called it exhausting, but only ever inside my own head, because the one time I said it out loud, my sister cried for 2 days and told everyone in the family I'd attacked her. This particular trip had started out as a birthday gift. My 31st birthday back in July, my sister had actually called me, not just texted, and said she wanted to do something special. A long weekend in Nashville, just the two of us, she said. Girl trip, her treat. By the time we were at the airport in Nashville heading home, it had turned into a 4-person trip that included her husband and his friend who I'd never met and did not want to know. The hotel room she'd booked was a double, which meant I spent 3 nights on a pull-out sofa that made us sound like a dying animal every time I shifted my weight. My birthday dinner was at a place her husband had picked because he had a Yelp coupon. At one point I overheard him say to her, in the hotel bathroom with the door not quite closed, "She never pushes back, does she? Just goes along with everything." And my sister laughed and said, "That's what I'm saying, it's like she doesn't even know." Know what I wanted to ask. But I didn't. I never did. So when they offered to drop me at my departing terminal on the way to returning their rental car, I said yes. I put my bag in the trunk. I climbed into the back seat, and somewhere between the rental return lane and Terminal C, my brother-in-law told me to hand my phone to my sister so she could check something on my Instagram. Some photo from the trip she wanted to see. And like an absolute fool I handed it to her without thinking, and she tucked it into her purse. And that was that. They stopped at the curb. My sister unlocked the doors. "This is you," she said. I got out. I reached back in for my bag, which was on the seat next to me. My wallet was in the outer pocket of the bag. At least I thought it was. But later I would realize she must have slipped it out while I was distracted looking at the terminal signs, because that pocket was empty too. Gone, along with my license, my debit card, and the $43 in cash I'd been carrying since Friday. The door closed. The car moved. I had nothing. I didn't panic right away. That's something I've noticed about myself in moments of real crisis. The panic comes later, after the adrenaline wears off. In the moment, I go very still and very quiet, and I start trying to solve the problem in front of me like it's a math equation. Okay, no phone, no wallet, no ID, flight in 40 minutes. What do I actually have? I had my carry-on, with 3 days of clothes and a half-empty bottle of dry shampoo and a paperback novel I hadn't opened once. I had my boarding pass, which was a paper printout. Thank God for that. Because my sister had printed it for me that morning and handed it to me without thinking, and I'd shoved it in my back pocket out of habit. And I had my keys, house keys and car keys, which were useless to me in an airport 300 miles from home. I went inside. The check-in counters were busy. There was a line at every station. I found the end of the line for my airline and stood in it, holding my boarding pass in both hands, like it was the most important document in the world, because right then it was. When I got to the agent, a woman about my mother's age with reading glasses on a beaded chain, I explained what had happened as calmly as I could. I told her I had no ID, but I had my boarding pass. I told her my bag was carry-on, so I didn't need to check anything. I told her I needed to get through security. She looked at me for a long moment. "No government-issued ID at all?" "No, ma'am." "Did you file a police report for the stolen items?" I opened my mouth and closed it again. I hadn't thought of that. I hadn't thought of it, because some part of my brain still hadn't fully processed that my own sister had deliberately taken my things. That's the thing about family. The mind resists conclusion, even when the evidence is sitting right in front of it. It wasn't stolen, I said, and then I stopped because I didn't know how to explain the rest without it sounding insane. The agent, her name tag said Ren, studied me for another moment. Then she said quietly, "Honey, do you need help?" I had to blink several times. "I need to get home," I said. My voice came out smaller than I meant it to. "That's all. I just really need to get home." She made some calls. She spoke in a low voice with someone in a back office. TSA has a process for passengers without ID. I didn't know this until that day, where they can verify your identity through additional screening. It takes longer. You have to answer questions, go through extra security checks, submit to additional screening of your belongings. But it can be done. Ren walked me through all of it, step by step, with a patience that I was not accustomed to receiving from strangers, or, for that matter, from people who were supposed to love me. "You're going to be okay," she told me, when it was all handled. "Gate C14. You've got time," I thanked her. I wanted to say more, but my throat had gone tight in that particular way. That means crying is close, and I didn't want to cry in the middle of an airport check-in counter. I walked away with my carry-on and my paper boarding pass and the increasingly unavoidable understanding that my sister had done this on purpose, had planned it, had coordinated it with her husband as a joke, and was right now probably somewhere in the rental return lot laughing about it together. The wait at security was longer than usual. I kept checking the departures board out of habit, and then remembering I didn't have a phone to check anything on. There's a specific kind of helplessness that comes with being without a phone in a modern airport. It's not just the communication you lose, it's the orientation. Every modern human instinct says, check the phone, get the information, verify the situation. Without it, you're navigating by feel, by signage, by asking actual humans for help, which I had apparently forgotten was an option. The security officer who processed my additional screening was a tall man named, according to his badge, Officer Darrell. He had the measured, unhurried energy of someone who had seen every possible airport situation and been rattled by exactly none of them. He asked me a series of questions: full name, date of birth, home address, last four of my social security, and checked my answers against whatever system he was looking at, and then he nodded once and said, "You're clear." "Thank you," I said. "You're having a hard day," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yeah." He nodded again, like this was sufficient. "Gate C14 is to your left, follow the signs, have a good flight." I followed the signs. The gate area was crowded. I found a seat near an outlet and sat down, not because I had anything to charge, but because sitting near an outlet meant the seats were slightly less coveted and I was more likely to actually get one. Old habit. I put my carry-on between my feet and I sat there and I let myself feel it, finally. The full weight of what had just happened. My sister had taken my phone, my wallet, and my ID, and left me at an airport in a city I don't live in, with no way to contact anyone, no way to pay for anything, no way to prove who I was. And she had done it, because she thought it was funny. Because she thought I would panic and scramble, and eventually figure it out, and then the story would become another thing she told at family dinners. Remember when we left her at the Louisville airport and she had nothing? And everyone would laugh, including me. Because that's what we did in my family. We laughed at the person who got hurt and then called it love. The woman sitting next to me had a toddler on her lap, who was determinedly trying to eat a board book. She glanced at me with that particular sympathy that mothers of toddlers have, a look that says, "I know suffering, I see yours, I acknowledge it, but my hands are full." "Long day?" she asked. Something like that. She reached into the enormous bag at her feet and produced, without ceremony, a granola bar. She held it out to me. "You look like you haven't eaten," she said. I almost said no. My first instinct, as always, was to say no, I'm fine, don't worry about me. But I actually hadn't eaten since a bad airport breakfast sandwich at 6 that morning, and it was now almost 2 in the afternoon. And I was running on nothing but adrenaline, and the particular pride of someone who has been performing, "I'm fine," for so long it has become involuntary. "Thank you," I said, and took it. Her name was Annette. She was flying home to Cincinnati with her daughter, who was 18 months old, and whose name was, apparently, Bug, though Annette clarified this was a nickname. We talked for a little while, nothing heavy, nothing about what had happened to me, just easy conversation about where we'd been, and whether the flight would be on time, and how Bug felt about airplanes. Ambivalent, it turned out. It was the most normal I'd felt all day. When they called our boarding zone, Annette touched my arm. "You sure you're okay, getting there?" I said. And I meant it. I was one of the last people on the plane. I found my window seat and shoved my carry-on into the overhead bin and sat down, and for the first time since the curb outside Terminal C, I exhaled completely. The seat next to me was empty. The flight was 2 hours. I was going to make it home. Somewhere over Kentucky, with the drone of the engines filling up the quiet and the clouds below us looking like something out of a painting, I started really thinking. Not about the logistics. I'd solved those. I was thinking about the pattern. About how many times over how many years I had bent myself into a pretzel to fit into the shape my family needed me to be. Agreeable, undemanding, easy. Oh, she doesn't mind. She's always so flexible. You never have to worry about her. I had worn those descriptions like badges, not understanding until somewhere over Kentucky that what they actually meant was, she will absorb whatever we give her and never ask for anything different. The carry-on was in the overhead bin, but there was a small zippered pocket in my bag I'd been using to hold things I needed quick access to. Chapstick, headphones, that kind of thing. When I'd grabbed the bag from the trunk earlier, moving fast because the car was in a no-stop zone, I'd shoved the bag's outer pocket items into this inner pocket without thinking. And in that inner pocket, along with the chapstick and the dead earbuds, was a small notebook I'd bought at a bookstore in Nashville on Saturday. I'd bought it on impulse, in the middle of an afternoon where my sister and her husband had wandered off to do something else and left me to entertain myself, which honestly was fine with me. The bookstore had a display of these little notebooks near the register, with different colors and patterns, and I'd picked up a dark green one because I liked the color, and I'd paid for it in cash from the money that was now gone from my wallet, and I'd put it in the inner pocket of my bag and mostly forgotten about it. I took it out now. I took the pen from the spiral binding, a little ballpoint that had come with it, and I started writing. Not anything organized, not a diary entry or a letter. Just the things that were in my head, pouring out in whatever order they came. I wrote about the airport. I wrote about Ren and Officer Darrell and Annette and Bug. I wrote about the granola bar and how it had been cheddar flavored, which is not my favorite, but had tasted like the best thing I'd eaten in days. I wrote about the moment at the curb when I'd understood what was happening and gone very still. I wrote about my sister's laugh. I wrote about the hotel pull-out sofa and the birthday dinner with the Yelp coupon and the $43 in cash I was probably never going to see again. And then I wrote something I hadn't let myself think before, not in so many words. I don't want to go back to this. Not to the airport situation. That was over. I meant the larger thing, the dynamic. The role I'd been assigned in my family and had played without question for 31 years, because questioning it had always felt too costly, too disruptive, too much like the kind of selfishness I'd been taught to see as a character flaw. My mother would call when I landed. She'd heard about the prank. I was sure of it, because my sister always looped our mother in when she pulled something like this. Needing an audience, needing validation that it was funny. My mother would call and she'd say something like, "I heard what happened. I hope you're okay. You know your sister doesn't mean any harm." And I would say, "I know." And that would be the end of it. Unless I didn't say I know. The plane began its descent into Columbus. I could see the city below, familiar and small in mine, the neighborhood where I lived visible if I imagined hard enough through the clouds. My phone was somewhere in my sister's purse. My wallet was probably on the back seat of the rental car they'd turned in. I would have to replace my license, cancel my debit card, change passwords on any accounts my sister might have access to through my phone. It was going to be an inconvenient week. But sitting there with my green notebook in my lap and the pen capped and tucked back into the spiral, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel. Clear. Like a window that's been fogged for a long time had been wiped clean all at once. Not happy. I wasn't happy. But clear. The landing was smooth. I had no phone to turn back on as we taxied. I waited for the aisle to clear, and then I retrieved my carry-on and walked up the jetway and back into Columbus International, which smelled like every airport smells. Recycled air and chain coffee and something vaguely industrial, but which was home in the specific way that the airport in your city is home. I went to a courtesy phone near baggage claim and called my friend from my contact number I actually had memorized. Because we'd been friends since before everyone stopped memorizing phone numbers, back when you had to punch digits in yourself. She answered on the second ring. "Hey," she said. "Why are you calling from a weird number?" "It's a long story," I said. "Are you anywhere near the Columbus airport?" She came. She showed up 40 minutes later in her old Subaru, with a travel mug of coffee in the cup holder that she'd made for me specifically, because she knows how I take it, and she'd had a feeling I needed it. She didn't ask too many questions on the way to my apartment. She just drove and let me sit in the passenger seat with the coffee, and when I started telling her what had happened, she listened without interrupting, which is the thing I love most about her. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I don't know yet," I said. "But I'm not going to say I know when my mom calls." She glanced at me sideways. "Good, my mother did call." That night around 8, after I'd canceled my debit card and filed a report with my bank and eaten actual food and taken a shower that lasted approximately 1 geological era, I let it ring twice and then I answered. "Sweetheart," my mother said. "I heard about the airport. Are you all right?" "I'm okay," I said. "But I want to talk about what happened." There was a pause. My mother is not used to me wanting to talk about things. I am the easy one, the flexible one, the one you don't have to worry about. "Of course," she said carefully. I told her. Not the version I would have told before. The compressed, smoothed-over version that minimized the disruption and made it easier for everyone to get back to normal. I told her the actual version. The wallet, the ID, the phone, the deliberate coordination of it, the rental return lot, where my sister and brother-in-law were laughing. I told her about the check-in counter and the TSA officer and the woman with the toddler who gave me a granola bar because I looked like I hadn't eaten. I told her about the notebook and what I wrote in it. My mother was quiet for a long time. "Your sister loves you," she finally said. "She just has a different way of—" "Mom," I said it firmly, the way I hadn't said anything firmly in 31 years. "I need you to hear what I'm saying, not to explain it, not to find the best interpretation of it, just to hear it." Another pause. Longer. "I hear you," she said. Her voice was different now, quieter, less sure. "Thank you," I said. We talked for another hour. It wasn't a fight. It wasn't a resolution either. There was no single conversation that was going to unwind decades of family patterns. But it was honest in a way our conversations had never been. And when we finally said goodnight, I sat for a while in my apartment, in the dark, and thought about the fact that I was 31 years old. And this was the first time I had required my mother to simply hear me. I didn't return my sister's texts that night. She'd sent 3. First a string of laughing emojis, then "Okay, you can call me now." Then a slightly more serious "Hey, I put your stuff in an envelope. I'll send it to you this week." No apology, no acknowledgement of how any of it might have felt from my side of the curb. Just the assumption that we would skip past it the way we skipped past everything, back to normal, no residue. I let the text sit there and went to sleep. Over the following days, I thought a lot about that word normal. What our normal had actually been. Not the surface version, the holiday card version, where we were a close family who loved each other and showed it in unconventional ways. The actual normal, beneath that, me absorbing, adapting, accommodating, and the rest of them never having to notice I was doing it, because I did it so seamlessly it looked like I just didn't mind. The wallet arrived Thursday in a padded envelope. Everything was there except the $43 in cash, which I figured was probably gone for good. There was no note. I didn't follow up about the missing cash. What I did do was start, very quietly, very methodically, building a version of my life that was mine in a way it hadn't been before. Not dramatic, not a big announcement, nothing that would make me the subject of a family conversation I wasn't ready to have yet. Just small adjustments. I said no to the group chat vacation plan for November. I didn't go to my brother-in-law's birthday dinner that my sister organized 2 weeks later. I stopped making myself available by default. Stopped assuming that my plans were the ones that mattered least. My friend came over one Friday evening, and we sat on my porch with drinks, and I told her what I'd been thinking about. "I don't want to be the one who's always fine with everything anymore," I said. "Okay," she said. "I think I'm scared that if I stop, they won't know what to do with me." "Probably true," she said. "That's their problem to figure out." I turned that over in my head for a while. It's been 4 months since the airport. My sister and I have spoken twice. Once when she called to see why I'd missed the birthday dinner, and once at our parents' house at Thanksgiving, where we were careful with each other in a way we'd never had to be before. She didn't bring up the airport. I didn't bring it up either. But the not bringing it up was different this time. It wasn't me smoothing things over and pretending it hadn't happened. It was me deciding, deliberately, that I didn't owe her the performance of being fine. My mother noticed the change. She mentioned it to me, gently, over the phone a few weeks after Thanksgiving. "You seem different," she said. "I think I am," I said. "Is that good?" I thought about Gate C14. I thought about Ren at the check-in counter saying, "Are you okay?" like she actually wanted to know. I thought about Officer Darryl who said you're having a hard day without any judgment in his voice, just simple recognition. I thought about Annette and Bug, and a cheddar granola bar, and a window seat over Kentucky, and a green notebook that I still have, sitting on my nightstand now, and what it felt like to write something honest in it for the first time. Yeah, I told my mother. I think it is. I don't know what the next Thanksgiving looks like, or the one after that. I don't know what version of my sister and I comes out on the other side of this, or whether there is an other side or just a long, slow renegotiation that never fully resolves. I know that families are complicated, and love is real even when it's badly expressed, and people don't change overnight, and also sometimes they don't change at all. What I know for certain is this: I stood on a curb at an airport with nothing, and I found my way home. Not because someone rescued me. No one rescued me. Ren helped me navigate a process. Officer Darrell cleared me through. Annette gave me a granola bar. My friend drove 40 minutes and brought coffee she'd made to my specification. All of that mattered, but the person who got me from that curb to my front door was me. I've been the easy one for 31 years. I'm not interested in being difficult. That's not what this is about. I'm interested in being honest. Taking up the space I actually take up. Saying what I actually mean, when I mean it, to the people who ought to be able to hear it. The green notebook is on my nightstand. I write in it most evenings now. It turns out I had a lot to say. I just needed somewhere to put it.